have a couch in my office. I have a love seat. So you got to curl up really tiny to lay on that thing. It wouldn't be comfortable.
When thinking about a therapist, it's important to consider whether you're going to use insurance or private pay.
What's happening there? What's not working for you? How can we help you shift things to reach your goals?
The best therapy, again, just being having dialogue and letting it flow.
Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Beth Gustin, licensed professional counselor, here with my co-host, Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker. We are both based out of Colorado. We thought we'd talk today a bit about how to find a good therapist and maybe how to know you need some therapy. It can be overwhelming when you are trying to find a therapist because there are lots and lots, I do mean lots of options out there and lots of places to look. And I think it's important to know kind of what you're looking for before you start looking, which if you don't know what you need, that can be really hard to do. And so we thought we'd kind of try to narrow down how to help you find a good therapist when you're ready to find one.
Exactly, because a therapist is supposed to be adding to your support system, right? That level of objectivity that you may need in order to gain more clarity. Because when you're in the midst of a situation, and even the people around you, they may be in the midst of the situation with you, it's harder to step back and see things that somebody who is not directly involved would be able to see. So that's how I feel therapy can be advantageous, especially if you're feeling stuck and not knowing how to get out of the particular stressor that you're feeling.
Yes, and I think it's also beneficial to have someone who has a very unbiased role in your life. They only know what you choose to share with them. And so it can be a really good way to also give yourself some self-care for that 1 hour a week, every other week that you set aside for yourself, where you get to work on what you share and get a perspective from someone who doesn't know you or anything about you or anything about anyone in your life.
And that's very important, Beth. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, right? Somebody who is unbiased, who doesn't know you, and who isn't somebody already in your life. So that's why a part of ethics amongst a therapist is that they cannot be friends or have any type of personal relationship with clients, so that you can be able to, again, to talk freely in that space and really be vulnerable and not worry about upsetting someone. So I regularly will talk about the professional role that I take amongst clients so that there won't be confusion, about am I their friend or their therapist? And I'm definitely their therapist, and talking about the differences between the two. I want to add is I think I was listening to a daytime talk show and they had talked about the Kardashians and Oprah, because Oprah's best friend, Gail. And so she talks in depth with Gail like she's her therapist, right? And so that's how it helps her be able to gain that level of support. And I think Kim Kardashian mentioned the same thing. And so I really liked how they addressed in this particular show that I was listening to, that your friend is not your therapist. They don't have that level of training, but then also too, it's not good to put all of that stuff on one single person who is not serving in that role.
And if you think about it, your friend may have your best interest in mind, but sometimes your friend may also, because they have unwavering support for you, may not have the ability to step back and really see the whole picture. Whereas a therapist who doesn't have that direct involvement or direct tie to you can help you take that step back yourself to see the whole picture and explore all the options or all the angles to help you make a better decision on whatever you're sharing with your friend. Whereas your friend might only see one side of it.
Exactly. How do you know that you need a therapist? I feel that you know that you need a therapist is through paying attention to yourself. If you feel like you're having repetitive thoughts of worry that you can't seem to shake or get through. If you feel like you're being more depressed and it's harder for you to get out of bed or function, right? I think that the main thing is if you feel like your emotions are adversely impacting your daily life, then that's how you know that you need therapy.
I agree with that. When whatever the challenge is interfering with day-to-day functioning, it's time to call a therapist. Mm-hmm. It's also time to call a therapist, though, when you find yourself kind of coming back to the same issue or challenge over and over and not finding a way to improve it.
Yes.
Not having it get any better. Not having things get lifted or weight lifted off of you. I think it's also time to seek therapy then. I think it's also time to seek therapy when you feel like your support system is not supportive to you. So I think there's a lot of reasons or signals that your brain and body give you, or your heart as well, that it's time to go see a therapist. And therapy, I want to just work on breaking down some stigma here. Therapy is not typically lying on the couch twice a week in your therapist's office for 20 years. And I'm poking a little bit of fun at some psychodynamic, and I apologize because I think there's a very much definite place and time for psychodynamic or psychoanalysis, which is very intensive, long, ongoing years of therapy.
I've had clients make jokes, right? Like, so if I come to see you in person, will I be laying on your couch while you're talking to me? I do think that, in all honesty, probably that reference that you mentioned, Beth, a lot of people imagine therapy being like that. Like they're laying on this couch and you're sitting there psychoanalyzing them the whole hour. And for some, I think that can be intimidating and probably even prevent them from seeking therapy because of that notion.
And for some, I think people need that. They want that long-term, very consistent, predictable, this is my time, and they need that support. So therapy is not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I want to talk about that a little bit today because I think there's a therapy approach for everyone who's willing to go to therapy, in my opinion, nowadays. There are lots of options out there. So you might need the years on end thing. I don't have a couch in my office. I have a love seat. So you got to curl up really tiny to lay on that thing. It wouldn't be comfortable. But therapy can be 6 sessions long if that's all you need for kind of what we call a one issue sort of thing. I've had clients that I have had for years, but I don't see them. I see them like once a week, once every other week. I've had clients that I've seen 3 times and they felt okay and moved on. So it really just depends on what you need and what approach you're looking for, because there are lots of modalities or methods to address different problems.
Exactly. And that's what makes it a collaborative process, because it really is starting where you are in that moment and working through the challenges that are bringing you to therapy and recognizing, hey, I feel better. I feel like I can navigate this by myself. It's also too to come back to therapy if you feel like that challenges are rising again, or there's other issues that you want to talk about. I definitely reiterate to my clients in the first session is that it's the goal to make you your own therapist, to equip you with the best tools so that you can feel confident in navigating whatever challenges you have. Like you, Beth, I have clients that I may see, and once they feel more confident in navigating stressors, then start to expand. Okay, are you ready for every 2 weeks? Are you ready for once a month, or whatever that looks like? But you very much are in control of your mental health care.
I think this brings up a really good point. There's different views on what is therapy. And therapy can be very goal-directed, problem-solving. We've got the solutions, we're done, you're good to go. If you need something in the future, reach out to me again. Therapy can also be, I just need a once-a-month check-in because I know I have this one time a month where I can just come in and process some things and just process what's happening in my life. That's all I need, but that helps me get through the next month knowing that I've got some things off my chest and I've got some different perspectives. And that's also therapy, in my opinion. So I think there's also a bit of a myth around what therapy is and how it can be helpful.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad you mentioned that. It really is depending on the goal. So I do have clients who just need to have that space to be heard, especially those. I have one who in particular has a chronic condition, and he feels like his provider, like the people around him, don't necessarily listen to him. So he needs that space where he can be listened to. So that's very true, Beth. It really, some people just need that level of check-in. I want to go off of that too, though. I think this is important to mention is that when thinking about a therapist, it's important to consider whether you're going to use insurance or private pay.
I was just going to go there.
Oh, all right. Perfect. So if you use insurance, just know that as a part of submitting claims for the therapist to get reimbursed, there has to be a medical diagnosis attached to it. And so really talking that through with whatever potential therapist you have and talking about, okay, well, what does the assessment look like in terms of diagnosis, and being open and asking questions about what they feel is the presenting condition. I think that's important. And then private pay, there's not necessarily a diagnosis needed for that.
Right. And I think that also is a difference with insurance and private pay. With insurance, you have to justify the need for therapy so that your insurance will pay that claim. I'm not saying you don't have to justify need for therapy in private pay. I'm just saying that it can be a little bit more free flowing, if you will, where sometimes those clients who just need what I call like the once a month check in or tune up, insurance may not cover that, but self pay will because you don't have a diagnosis. And so you don't have to kind of prove the clinical necessity from an insurance standpoint.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And you said it perfectly. And I think that's why some therapists don't like accepting insurance for that reason. It's because they feel like you're confined in boxes. I've heard that from different providers, in terms of clinical justification when a client comes to see you. I feel like insurance opens the door to treating more people, especially marginalized individuals, but it can be tricky to navigate. So you really have to find a therapist who has that balance, right? Really making sure that you still are at that forefront of that client-centered care.
I agree. And I think other things to think about when looking for a therapist is, do you want someone who's very action-oriented, goal-directed, more confrontational? That's not the word I want to use, but more, will challenge you. Or do you want someone who's a little more laid back, more conversational, lets things kind of unfold? There's lots of different therapeutic styles. And I think most of us are a blend, but we all do lean one way or the other in our therapeutic approach. Some people like a stronger personality. Some people like a softer personality. You need to be comfortable talking with your therapist. You don't always have to like them, but you have to be comfortable talking to them.
Right.
Build that trust with them. And I say, you don't have to like them because sometimes your therapist is going to challenge you on things and you're not going to like what they have to say. But they do that, or we do that, because we're trying to help you look at a different angle or see a different perspective. Or if you're coming in and talking about the same thing and there's no change, we're going to talk about that and bring it up and kind of figure out like what's happening there, what's not working for you. How can we help you shift things to reach your goals? And sometimes that does involve taking a hard look at yourself. And there's different approaches therapists will take to help you do that.
Yes, I agree, Beth. I was smiling when you said that because my clients, I'm a blend. And it's interesting because I think some of my clients find it hard to believe that I'm an introvert. But in my professional life, I have to be vocal, right? Because in those sessions, it's not about me, it's about my clients. And so I tend to be a blend of listening and comfort, but also to challenging my clients, especially because with depression, if you keep falling and falling in the midst of it, it can be harder to pull yourself out of it. And so if I start to feel like my clients are getting stuck, then I will start to really challenge those thoughts, or actually even before I feel like they're getting stuck, I challenge those thoughts to get them to think outside of their feelings and emotions, to be the observer. And so sometimes I'm pretty sure my clients do not like me in that moment. And I do give them a little pushback because, again, it's realizing the intent behind your therapist. And typically, the intent is supposed to be one of good natured, right? They're giving you that pushback, not to argue with you or to make you feel bad, but rather to do the opposite, to make you feel better, to be more gentle with yourself or whatever it may be in that moment.
Yes, and know that 99.999% of the time, your therapist also has your best interest in mind. And we're human too. So we don't always maybe say things the best way that is the best way to be heard, but we try really hard to match kind of your style and how you hear things in hopes that we can have these conversations with you, not work against you. And one thing I do with my clients is about every 3 or 4 sessions, I'll check in and say, hey, how are we doing? Are we on track with your goals? How's this approach working for you? Is there anything that we can talk about changing? And if it's within my ability to change it, I will. But it also allows for conversations of like, hey, if this isn't working for you, what else might make sense? Or what different approach can we try? And so I try to do relatively frequent check-ins just to make sure that we're on the same page and we're still meshing. And if we're not, I highly encourage my clients to advocate and speak up because I'm not everyone's cup of tea or shot of whiskey, as I recently heard, and I like that phrase, So it's important that it's a good fit, not just from day one, but throughout the whole entire time you're working with somebody.
Yep, I agree. I mentioned that too, is with my clients. Anytime throughout this process, if you feel like something's not working, let me know. Or if you feel like you want to try another therapist, let me know too, and I can help find resources. Yeah, I do my check-in. I try to every 3 to 4 months to to see how things are going. And I think that sometimes, and again, it really goes back to when a therapist does a check-in, it doesn't mean that they don't think that you're a good fit, but they want to make sure how things are going in that moment. I do have clients who may get a little bit defensive when I do those check-ins and they feel like I'm trying to close the door on them per se in a way, but it's definitely not the intent. But therapy can be so, you have to really make yourself vulnerable. And so I just want to make sure that it's a good process for everyone involved.
Exactly. And to that end, I know this is a longer episode. There's a lot to cover here, I think, though. I want to circle back a little bit to approaches to therapy. Because, again, do you want a therapist who looks at, for example, how your thoughts and behaviors work together? And can we work on changing your thoughts so that your behaviors are more helpful to you? Do you want a therapist who does more trauma work and uses more experiential or body approaches like movement in your body and feeling things in your body? Do you want a therapist who is more like narrative therapy is coming to mind? So a therapist who is more looking at the stories that we tell ourselves and how do we change those stories? And all these approaches can get to the same end result, but not every approach is good for every challenge, and not every person is going to resonate with every approach.
Right. And going off of approaches, I want to mention identity. That kind of falls into that realm too. Mm-hmm. Some people will seek out therapy from people who are of a certain gender or a certain race or disability background or
religious background,
religious, sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. Because I've heard people say, well, you know what, I feel like I don't have to explain, or, you just get it in a way where I don't feel like I have to start over and tell my story again or, educate somebody. So I think that could fall into approaches too.
I agree. I always tell my prospective clients, I'm like, do shop around, talk to multiple therapists, see who you're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. What's going to meet your needs financially, emotionally? Do you want telehealth or in person? How far do you want to drive? If you want in person, how many buses do you want to take to get there? Mm-hmm. All these things are factors to keep in mind when you're looking for a therapist.
Exactly. And I just want to add, when you meet a therapist, really be in tune on how you're reacting to them physically, because that will let you know too, hey, I feel like this is a good fit. I feel like I can let my guard down. I feel like I can be open and vulnerable in this space. So I think that's a good indicator. And, you don't always have to know what to say when you go to therapy, because I think that traps people too in trying to think of what to say, but just see where it goes. The best therapy, again, just having dialogue and letting it flow.
Yep. And as always, we appreciate your feedback, your comments, your questions. We do get them. We do respond. We're always happy to hear from you, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. We want to know what our listeners think and what's helpful to them. So until next time, please take care and stay grounded.
Until next time, take care.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself. Oh, yeah.
When we share
what we see through
each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.
and the realities of blind abilities.